bring you to your brother's house.
Hello friends, welcome back. If you are looking for a complete and in-depth review of this movie, Maximum Risk 1996, you have come to the right place. In today's video, we'll break down the full story, explore the talented cast, analyze the box office performance, and highlight the most powerful moments that make this film stand out. So make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's get started. The story begins with a man named Jean-Claude Van Damme playing the role of Alain Moreau, a tough and dedicated French police officer living in the city of Nice. Alain is known for his discipline and commitment to justice. He lives a relatively normal life, working hard and carrying out his duties without knowing that fate is about to reveal a secret that will change everything he believes about himself. Unbeknownst to him, somewhere else in the world, another man who looks exactly like him is living a dangerous and mysterious life. One day, a violent incident takes place in New York City. A man named Mikhail Suvorov is being chased and attacked by powerful enemies. During a brutal confrontation, he is killed before he can escape. Authorities begin investigating the murder, but the case appears strange from the beginning. Before his death, Mikhail had been desperately trying to contact someone and had left behind clues that pointed to secrets buried deep in his past. What nobody realizes is that Mikhail and Alain Moreau share something extraordinary. They are identical twins who were separated shortly after birth. Back in France, Alain receives unexpected news that completely shocks him. He learns that the murdered man in New York looked exactly like him. At first, he refuses to believe it, assuming there must be some mistake. But when photographs and documents are shown to him, he is left speechless. The resemblance is impossible to ignore. Questions immediately flood his mind. Who was this man? Why had he never heard of him before? And how could someone who looked exactly like him exist on the other side of the world? As Alain begins investigating further, he discovers a painful truth. Many years earlier, circumstances had separated him from his twin brother. While Alain grew up in France and became a police officer, Mikhail had lived an entirely different life. The realization fills Alain with emotions he cannot fully understand. He feels sadness over the brother he never knew, but also curiosity about the life Mikhail had lived. More importantly, he becomes determined to understand why his brother was murdered. Driven by a need for answers, Alain decides to travel to New York. The decision is dangerous and impulsive, but he feels he has no choice. This is no longer simply a murder investigation, it is personal. As he arrives in the United States, he quickly notices that things are far more complicated than he expected. Mikhail had been involved with dangerous people, and powerful enemies are still searching for unfinished business. Alain soon realizes that stepping into his brother's world means stepping directly into danger. While trying to uncover the truth, Alain meets Alex Minetti, a woman who had been close to Mikhail. She is initially shocked by Alain's appearance because he looks identical to the man she loved. At first, she suspects some kind of trick, but eventually she understands the truth. Together, they begin piecing together fragments of Mikhail's secret life. However, every answer they uncover only raises new questions. It becomes increasingly clear that Mikhail had become involved with powerful criminals and had been trying desperately to escape from them before his death. Meanwhile, dangerous enemies discover that someone who looks exactly like Mikhail is asking questions. Believing that their problems have returned, they begin hunting Alain without realizing that he is actually Mikhail's twin brother. Suddenly, Alain finds himself trapped inside a deadly game that he never intended to join. Assassins are watching, criminals are searching for him, and he has no idea who he can trust. His simple search for answers is turning into a fight for survival. Despite the growing danger, Alain refuses to abandon his mission. The more he learns about Mikhail, the stronger his determination becomes. He begins feeling connected to the brother he never had the chance to know. Even though they lived completely different lives, blood still connected them. Alain believes that discovering the truth about Mikhail's death is the least he can do to honor him. But he also realizes that his enemies are becoming more desperate and more dangerous with every passing day. As night falls over New York, Alain stands alone, staring at the city around him. Somewhere within these streets lies the truth about his brother's murder. But finding that truth will come with a price. He has already stepped into a world filled with deception, violence, and betrayal, and without realizing it, he has become the target of people who are willing to kill anyone who stands in their way. What Elaine does not yet know is that his search for answers is only beginning, and the deeper he goes, the more dangerous his journey will become. After arriving in New York City, Alain Moreau quickly realizes that his brother's death was far from a simple crime. The city feels unfamiliar and dangerous, and every step he takes seems to pull him deeper into a world he does not understand. Although he came searching for answers, he soon discovers that someone is watching him. The moment he begins asking questions about Mikhail Suvorov, strange faces start appearing around him, and it becomes clear that powerful people do not want the truth to come out. Alain's only lead is Alex Minetti, the woman who had been close to Mikhail before his death. When they first meet, Alex is shocked beyond words. Seeing Alain's face brings back painful memories because he looks exactly like the man she loved. At first, she believes Mikhail somehow survived, but Alain explains the truth about being his twin brother. Although confused and emotional, Alex eventually accepts his story. She also realizes that Mikhail had been hiding secrets from her and that his death was connected to dangerous people who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. Together, Alain and Alex begin retracing Mikhail's final days. They search through his belongings, trying to understand what he had been involved in. Slowly, they discover that Mikhail had been working undercover and had become entangled with members of the Russian mafia. He had gathered information that threatened powerful criminals, and before his death, he had been trying desperately to escape from them. Unfortunately, he never got the chance. The truth had cost him his life. Meanwhile, the same criminals who killed Mikhail received disturbing news. Reports indicate that someone who looks exactly like him has been seen around New York. Believing that Mikhail somehow survived, they immediately begin searching for him. They cannot afford to take any chances because they fear the secrets he possessed might still be exposed. As a result, Alain unknowingly becomes the target of ruthless killers who are convinced that he is the same man they thought they had already eliminated. Before long, Alain finds himself in serious trouble. What started as an investigation turns into a desperate fight for survival. Armed men begin chasing him, forcing him to rely on his police training and instincts. Although he is skilled and fearless, he quickly realizes that he is dealing with professionals who have no hesitation about killing innocent people. Every corner of the city suddenly feels dangerous, and Alain understands that he can trust very few people. Alex becomes increasingly frightened as she sees the violence surrounding them. She wants to escape and forget everything, but Alain refuses to walk away. He believes he owes it to his brother to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it becomes. For the first time, he begins feeling a strange connection to Mikhail. Even though they never met, Alan cannot ignore the fact that they shared the same blood. Solving his brother's murder becomes more than just a mission. It becomes something deeply personal. As they continue searching for answers, Alain starts uncovering hidden documents and information left behind by Mikhail. These clues reveal that corruption runs much deeper than expected. Powerful criminals are involved, and there may even be people within law enforcement who are protecting them. The realization shocks Alain because it means he cannot easily distinguish between allies and enemies. Anyone around him could be working against him. The danger escalates when Ellen and Alex narrowly survive another attack. The criminals are becoming impatient and more aggressive. They are determined to silence anyone connected to Mikhail before secrets are exposed. Ellen understands that running will not solve anything. Sooner or later, he will have to confront the people responsible. But before that can happen, he needs to know exactly what his brother discovered and why so many powerful men are willing to kill to keep it hidden. Late one night, while examining more evidence, Alan finally begins understanding the scale of the conspiracy. Mikhail had uncovered information capable of destroying dangerous people with enormous influence. That information is still out there, and now everyone believes Alan possesses it. Whether he likes it or not, he has inherited his brother's enemies and his unfinished battle. Standing beside Alex, Alan realizes that there is no turning back now. The people hunting him will never stop, and somewhere in the shadows, the men responsible for his brother's death are preparing to strike again. As Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti continued searching for answers, The danger surrounding them grew more serious with every passing hour. What had begun as a personal investigation into Mikhail Suvorov's death had now turned into a deadly struggle against powerful enemies. The Russian mafia believed that Mikhail had somehow survived, and because Alain looked exactly like his twin brother, he had become their target. Everywhere he went, danger followed. It was becoming clear that New York was no longer just a city, it had become a battlefield. Although Alex was frightened by the violence around them, she refused to abandon Alain. She knew that Mikhail had been trying to protect her before he died, and now she felt responsible for helping his brother uncover the truth. Together, they searched through hidden documents and personal belongings left behind by Mikhail. The deeper they looked, the more disturbing the truth became. Mikhail had not simply been involved with criminals. He had been trying to expose a network of corruption that reached powerful figures with dangerous connections. Those people would do anything to make sure their secrets remained hidden. Meanwhile, the men responsible for Mikhail's murder became increasingly desperate. Their leader understood that if certain information ever reached the wrong hands, everything they had built could collapse. They ordered their men to find and eliminate Alain before he could discover the truth. Professional assassins and ruthless gangsters began searching the city, turning Alain's investigation into a race against time. Every moment he remained alive increased the risk that their secrets would be exposed. Despite being hunted, Alain refused to run. His years as a police officer had taught him how to stay calm under pressure. He relied on his instincts and combat skills to survive. Whenever danger appeared, he fought with determination and intelligence. But even with his experience, he knew he was facing enemies with resources and influence far beyond anything he had dealt with before. One mistake could cost him his life. Still, he could not abandon the mission. Too much had already been sacrificed. As Elaine and Alex spent more time together, a bond slowly developed between them. Alex was still grieving Mikhail's death, and seeing his identical twin often brought painful memories. Yet, she also recognized that Elaine was different. While they shared the same face, they had lived completely different lives. Elaine's honesty and courage slowly earned her trust, and together they found strength in one another. In the middle of danger and uncertainty, their growing connection became one of the few things keeping them both going. Their search eventually led them to information hidden by Mikhail before his death. He had anticipated that something might happen to him and had left behind clues pointing toward evidence capable of exposing powerful criminals. However, retrieving that evidence would not be easy. It was hidden carefully, and dangerous people were already trying to locate it. Alan realized that his brother had risked everything to protect the truth, and now that responsibility had passed to him. The pressure intensified when another violent confrontation nearly cost Elaine and Alex their lives. Armed men attacked them without warning, forcing Elaine to rely on his training and quick reflexes. The fight was brutal, and it became obvious that their enemies were losing patience. They no longer cared about subtlety or secrecy. They simply wanted Elaine dead. Escaping the attack left both Elaine and Alex shaken, but it also strengthened their determination. They knew that if they stopped now, Mikhail's death would have been meaningless. As night fell over New York, Alain found himself thinking about the brother he had never known. Fate had separated them at birth, and now tragedy had brought them together in the most painful way possible. He wondered what kind of man Mikhail had been and whether their lives would have been different if they had grown up together. Although he would never have those answers, Alain felt connected to him in a way he could not explain. This was no longer simply about revenge, it was about family. Meanwhile, the criminals hunting him were preparing their next move. They had begun to realize that Alain Moreau was not the helpless victim they expected. Unlike Mikhail, who had spent years trying to escape them, Alain was willing to fight back. That made him far more dangerous, and for the first time, fear began spreading among the men who believed they controlled everything. Standing beside Alex and staring at the city lights, Alain understood one thing clearly: the truth was getting closer, but so was the final confrontation, and very soon someone would have to pay the ultimate price. After surviving several deadly encounters, Alain Moreau realized that there was no longer any possibility of returning to his old life in France. What had started as a journey to understand the death of his twin brother had become a war against powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. Every move he made was being watched, and every clue he uncovered brought him closer to the truth and closer to death. Yet, despite the danger surrounding him, Alain refused to walk away. He had come too far to abandon his brother's memory now. Alex Minetti remained by his side even though fear was beginning to consume her. She had already lost Mikhail, and now she feared losing Alain as well. Watching him fight against impossible odds reminded her of the man she once loved, but she also understood that Alain was different. He had a determination and sense of justice that made him impossible to stop. Although part of her wanted to escape and leave the nightmare behind, another part knew that running would only delay the inevitable. The people chasing them would never stop until they were dead. As they continued investigating, Alain uncovered more information about Mikhail's secret activities. His brother had been gathering evidence against powerful members of the Russian mafia and corrupt associates who were involved in criminal operations throughout the city. Mikhail had realized that exposing them would put his life in danger, but he had continued anyway. The more Alain learned about him, the more respect he felt for the brother he never had the chance to know. Despite growing up in completely different worlds, they shared the same courage and unwillingness to surrender. Meanwhile, the criminal organization was beginning to lose control. Their previous attempts to kill Alain had failed, and this frustrated the men in charge. They were no longer dealing with a frightened victim. Alain had become a serious threat. Not only had he survived their attacks, but he was also moving closer to evidence that could destroy everything they had built. Their leader ordered his men to become more aggressive. No mistakes would be tolerated. Alain Moreau had to die before he could expose the truth. The danger intensified when Alain and Alex found themselves trapped in another deadly ambush. Armed men attacked without warning, turning the streets into a battlefield. Bullets flew in every direction as Alain fought desperately to protect both himself and Alex. Using his police training and incredible fighting skills, he managed to overcome the attackers, but the narrow escape made one thing painfully clear: their enemies were becoming increasingly desperate. They were willing to kill anyone and everyone who stood in their way. After escaping, Alain finally decided that simply running and defending himself was no longer enough. He needed to go on the offensive. Waiting for his enemies to strike again would only place Alex in greater danger. He understood that the only way to survive was to uncover the hidden evidence and expose the men responsible before they reached him first. For the first time since arriving in New York, Alan stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a hunter. As they searched through Mikhail's remaining clues, Alan and Alex slowly began piecing together the final parts of the puzzle. Mikhail had anticipated betrayal and had carefully hidden information that could bring down some very powerful people. However, reaching that evidence would not be easy. It was hidden behind layers of secrets, and dangerous enemies were also searching for it. The race had entered its final stages, and time was running out. Throughout all of this, Alan found himself thinking constantly about his brother. Every new discovery revealed another side of Mikhail's life, and with each revelation came a mixture of sadness and admiration. Although they had never met, Alan felt as though he was finally beginning to know him. In another life, they might have shared memories, laughed together, and protected one another. Instead, tragedy had brought them together after death. That painful thought strengthened Alan's determination. He would make sure Mikhail's sacrifice meant something. Meanwhile, the men hunting Elaine were becoming increasingly nervous. Reports of his survival and growing resistance spread fear among them. They had underestimated him from the beginning, assuming he would be easy to eliminate. But Alain Moreau had proven to be something they never expected. He was a fighter. And now, with the truth almost within reach, the battle was about to become even more dangerous. Because both sides understood one thing: the next move could decide everything. After narrowly escaping yet another attack, Alain Moreau understood that time was running out. His enemies had become more desperate and far more aggressive. No longer satisfied with simply watching him, they were now openly trying to eliminate him and anyone close to him. The city of New York had become a dangerous maze where death seemed to be waiting around every corner. But despite the fear and uncertainty, Alain refused to back down. He had inherited his brother Mikhail's unfinished fight, and he was determined to see it through to the end. Alex Minetti remained at his side, though the constant danger was taking a heavy emotional toll on her. She had already lost the man she loved, and now she feared that Alain would suffer the same fate. The more time they spent together, the closer they became. At first, their relationship had been built on tragedy and confusion, but now trust and understanding had grown between them. Alex admired Alain's courage and his refusal to abandon the truth, even when every instinct told him to run. Despite her fears, she knew that leaving him alone was impossible. Meanwhile, the Russian mafia was beginning to panic. Their repeated failures had embarrassed them, and their leaders were becoming impatient. They knew that Alain was getting closer to the evidence Mikhail had hidden. If that information became public, powerful men would lose everything. Determined to prevent disaster, they ordered their men to hunt Alain down with even greater force. This time, they were not willing to take any risks. Alain Moreau had become their highest priority. While examining clues left behind by Mikhail, Alain finally discovered something important. His brother had anticipated betrayal long before his death. Knowing that he might not survive, Mikhail had hidden sensitive information in a place only someone persistent enough would find. The evidence pointed toward powerful criminal activities involving dangerous people who had influence beyond the streets. It became clear that corruption reached much deeper than Alain had imagined. This was no longer just about gangsters. Powerful individuals with connections and money were involved, making the situation even more dangerous. As Alain and Alex moved closer to uncovering the truth, they found themselves constantly looking over their shoulders. Every stranger seemed suspicious, and every sound felt threatening. Sleep became almost impossible. Their lives had become a never ending cycle of running, hiding, and fighting. Yet, despite the exhaustion, Alain's determination never weakened. He often thought about the brother he had never known. The more he learned about Mikhail, the stronger his connection to him became. Solving his murder had become more than a mission, it had become a promise. One night, while trying to reach another lead, Alan and Alex were suddenly ambushed. Armed men surrounded them and chaos erupted. A brutal fight followed as Alan used every skill he possessed to survive. Bullets shattered windows, fists flew, and the streets became a battlefield. Despite being outnumbered, Alan fought with incredible determination. He managed to protect Alex and escape once again, but the encounter left him with an important realization. Running was no longer enough. His enemies would never stop chasing him. After the attack, Alain made a decision. Instead of waiting for the criminals to strike again, he would take the fight directly to them. He understood that staying on the defensive would only lead to more danger for himself and Alex. If he wanted to survive and honor his brother's memory, he had to become the aggressor. For the first time, he stopped thinking about escape and started planning revenge. At the same time, the criminals were beginning to fear Alain. They had underestimated him from the start, believing he would be an easy target. Instead, he had survived every attack and continued moving closer to the truth. Reports of his actions spread through their organization, creating doubt among the men sent to kill him. They realized that Alain Moreau was not a frightened victim. He was becoming their worst nightmare. Standing beside Alex late that night, Alain looked out across the city lights. Somewhere out there were the men responsible for his brother's death. Somewhere out there were the answers he had been searching for since arriving in America. And now, with the truth almost within reach, Alain knew that the final battle was approaching. One way or another, this war would soon come to an end. After making the decision to stop running and start fighting back, Alain Moreau began approaching the situation differently. Until now, he had spent most of his time reacting to attacks and struggling to stay alive. But the constant violence and the endless pursuit had taught him one thing: his enemies would never stop. As long as the hidden evidence remained undiscovered, the men responsible for Mikhail Suvorov's death would continue hunting him. Alain realized that the only way to end the nightmare was to destroy the people behind it. Alex Minetti could see the change in him. The calm French police officer who had arrived in New York searching for answers was slowly transforming into a man driven by determination and revenge. Although she worried about the path he was taking, she understood his reasons. Together, they had survived too much to simply walk away. Every attack, every close escape, and every new revelation had brought them closer together. Their relationship had become stronger, built not only on fear and loss, but also on trust and hope. Meanwhile, the Russian mafia was growing increasingly nervous. Their leaders had expected Alain to die quickly, but instead he had survived every attempt on his life. Worse still, he was beginning to uncover the secrets Mikhail had died protecting. The organization feared that the evidence hidden by Mikhail would expose not only their criminal activities but also powerful individuals connected to them. Desperate to avoid disaster, they ordered their men to intensify the search. Failure was no longer acceptable. Using the information left behind by his brother, Alain slowly pieced together a clearer picture of the conspiracy. Mikhail had been trying to escape the criminal world while secretly collecting evidence against dangerous people. He had known his life was in danger and had prepared for the possibility that he might never live to reveal the truth. Alain admired the courage his brother had shown. Even though they had never met, he felt an unbreakable bond with him. Every clue he uncovered, made him feel closer to the brother fate had taken away from him. As Alan and Alex followed another lead, they discovered that corruption extended further than they had imagined. There were people with influence protecting the criminal organization, making it difficult to know who could be trusted. This realization made Alan even more cautious. He understood that exposing the truth would require more than courage, it would require intelligence and patience. One mistake could cost them their lives. Despite the danger, Alan refused to slow down. His years of police training and natural fighting ability allowed him to stay one step ahead of his enemies. However, even he could feel the physical and emotional exhaustion building inside him. Constantly looking over his shoulder, sleeping with one eye open, and living under the threat of death had changed him. But rather than weakening his spirit, the pressure made him more determined. He had already lost too much to give up now. One evening, while investigating another clue, Alan and Alex were once again attacked. This time, the criminals came prepared. A violent confrontation erupted, and Alan found himself facing multiple armed men. The fight was intense and dangerous, but Alan's instincts and determination helped them survive. The attackers were defeated, but the message was clear. The enemy knew they were getting closer to the truth. Time was running out for everyone involved. After escaping, Alan finally managed to recover a crucial piece of evidence left behind by Mikhail. It contained information powerful enough to destroy the organization responsible for his death. Holding the evidence in his hands, Alan understood why so many people had been willing to kill for it. This was the key to everything. It could expose criminals, reveal corruption, and bring justice for his brother. But possessing it also made him an even bigger target. At the same time, the leaders of the criminal organization received devastating news. Alain Moreau had found what they had been desperately searching for. Panic spread among them. They realized that if he succeeded in exposing them, their empire would collapse. Furious and desperate, they prepared for one final attempt to eliminate him before it was too late. Standing beside Alex, Ellen looked at the evidence and thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had come to New York searching for answers, but instead he had inherited a war that had already cost his brother his life. And now, as the truth finally came into focus, Helen knew something else. The enemy was preparing for one last battle, and very soon there would be nowhere left to run. After finally obtaining the evidence that Mikhail Suvorov had died protecting, Alain Moreau realized that everything had changed. The information in his possession was powerful enough to destroy dangerous men and expose years of criminal activity. But with that knowledge came an even greater danger. The Russian mafia and the corrupt individuals connected to them were now desperate. They no longer cared about hiding their actions or avoiding attention. Their only objective was simple: kill Alain Moreau before the truth could reach the authorities. Alex Minetti could see the seriousness of the situation. Until now, they had managed to survive by staying one step ahead of their enemies, but that advantage was disappearing. The people hunting them had resources, money, and influence. They could strike anywhere and at any time. Despite the fear she felt, Alex refused to leave Alain. Too much had happened and too many sacrifices had been made. They had already lost Mikhail, and neither of them intended to let his death be meaningless. Together, they prepared themselves for whatever lay ahead. Meanwhile, panic spread among the leaders of the criminal organization. Reports confirmed that Alan had recovered the information Mikhail had hidden. Their worst nightmare was becoming reality. Furious and desperate, they ordered every available man to track him down. They understood that if Alain reached the authorities with the evidence, everything they had built would collapse. Powerful allies would abandon them, and years of carefully hidden crimes would be exposed. For the first time, fear began to replace confidence among the criminals who had once believed themselves untouchable. Alain spent hours studying the information left behind by his brother. Every document and every clue revealed how deeply corruption had spread. Mikhail had risked everything trying to expose the truth, knowing full well that it might cost him his life. Alain could not help but admire the courage his brother had shown. Although they had been separated since birth and had lived completely different lives, they shared the same sense of justice. In many ways, Alain felt as though he was finishing the mission his brother had started. As the pressure mounted, Alain began planning his next move carefully. He understood that simply handing over the evidence would not be enough. Powerful people involved in the conspiracy might still try to bury the truth. He needed to ensure that the information reached the right hands. But before he could do that, he had to survive. Every move had to be calculated because one mistake would allow his enemies to destroy everything. Their fears became reality when another violent attack took place. The criminals launched a carefully planned ambush, hoping to finally eliminate Alain and recover the evidence. The confrontation was brutal. Bullets flew, vehicles crashed, and chaos erupted around them. Alain fought with incredible determination, using every skill he possessed to protect both himself and Alex. Despite being outnumbered, he once again managed to escape. However, the attack left no doubt in his mind. The final confrontation was approaching, and his enemies would stop at nothing to win. After escaping, Alain and Alex found temporary safety. Exhausted and emotionally drained, they finally had a moment to breathe. During the quiet hours of the night, Alain reflected on everything that had happened. He thought about the brother he never had the chance to know, the life he had left behind in France, and the woman sitting beside him who had become his closest ally. So much had changed in such a short time, yet, despite all the pain and violence, he had no regrets. Some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the cost. At the same time, the criminal leaders were making preparations for one final operation. Their patience had run out. They no longer cared how many men they lost or how much damage they caused. Alain Moreau had become too dangerous to ignore. If they failed now, their empire would fall apart. The next encounter would not be another warning or another attempt to intimidate him. It would be war. Standing beside Alex, Alan loaded his weapon and looked out across the city lights. Somewhere in the darkness, the men responsible for his brother's murder were preparing for their final move. And for the first time since arriving in America, Alain was ready because he no longer intended to survive. He intended to win. As dawn approached, Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti knew they had reached a point where there was no turning back. The evidence left behind by Mikhail Suvorov was now in their possession, and with every passing hour, their enemies were becoming more desperate. Elaine could sense that the organization hunting them was preparing something bigger than the previous attacks. The pattern had changed. They were no longer trying to scare him or force him into hiding. They wanted a final solution, and Elaine understood that the next encounter could decide everything. Despite the constant danger, Alex remained beside him. She had every reason to leave and disappear, but she refused. The memory of Mikhail and everything they had suffered together had created a bond between her and Alain that neither of them could ignore. During a rare quiet moment, they spoke honestly about fear and uncertainty. Alex admitted that she was terrified, not only for herself but for him as well. Alain, however, remained calm. He knew fear was natural, but he had already accepted the possibility that he might not survive. What mattered most to him now was making sure his brother's sacrifice would not be forgotten. Meanwhile, inside the criminal organization, anger and panic were spreading. Their leader realized that every failed attack had only made Elaine stronger and more determined. Some of his men were beginning to question their chances of success. Rumors about Elaine's fighting abilities and his incredible luck had created an atmosphere of fear among those assigned to kill him. But fear did not change the orders. The evidence had to be recovered, and Alain Moreau had to be eliminated before the truth reached the authorities. Determined to stay one step ahead, Alain carefully examined the documents and information Mikhail had hidden. Piece by piece, the puzzle became clearer. His brother had uncovered financial records, names, and secret connections linking dangerous criminals with influential individuals. It was enough to destroy powerful people and expose years of corruption. Holding those documents, Alan felt an overwhelming sense of respect for Mikhail. Despite growing up on opposite sides of the world, they shared the same courage. Mikhail had died trying to do the right thing, and Alan was determined to finish what he had started. Knowing that time was running out, Alan made plans to deliver the evidence to people he believed could be trusted. But even as he prepared, he understood that his enemies would not allow him to do so easily. Every movement had to be calculated, every location had to be chosen carefully. One mistake could undo everything. The pressure was enormous, but Alan's years as a police officer had taught him how to stay focused even when danger surrounded him. Before they could make their move, another threat emerged. Suspicious figures began appearing around them, making it clear that the organization had once again found their trail. Alan immediately recognized the signs. Their enemies were closing in. What followed was another tense and dangerous escape that forced Alan and Alex to rely on instinct and quick decisions. Although they managed to avoid immediate danger, the experience left them with one unavoidable truth. The final confrontation was no longer days away. That night, unable to sleep, Alain sat alone, thinking about the strange path his life had taken. Only a short time earlier, he had been a police officer in France, living an ordinary life. Now, he was standing in the middle of a war he had inherited from a brother he had never met. Fate had brought them together in the cruelest way possible, but Alain no longer saw this as a burden. He saw it as a responsibility to seek justice and to ensure that Mikhail's death had meaning. Beside him, Alex quietly watched as he prepared himself mentally for what was coming. She could see that something had changed inside him. The uncertainty and confusion that had marked his arrival in New York were gone. In their place stood a man driven by purpose, a man who had accepted the danger and who was ready to face it head on. Far away, the men responsible for Mikhail's death were making their own preparations. Weapons were being gathered, plans were being finalized, and one last operation was being set into motion. They believed that once Alain Moreau was dead, their problems would disappear forever. But they had made one fatal mistake. They still underestimated him, and very soon both sides would collide in a battle from which only one would walk away victorious. The tension in New York City reached its peak as Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti prepared for what they knew would be the final confrontation. The evidence left behind by Mikhail Suvorov was now secure, but holding on to it was becoming more dangerous with every passing minute. The criminal organization hunting them had stopped playing games. Every resource they had was now focused on one objective: erase Alain before he could expose the truth. Alain could feel the shift in the atmosphere around him. The city no longer felt like a place of random danger, but like a controlled trap slowly closing in. Every movement they made was likely being tracked. Every possible escape route was at risk of being cut off. Still, he remained calm. Years of police training had taught him that panic only led to mistakes, and mistakes in a situation like this meant death. Alex stayed close to him even though fear was becoming harder to hide. She had already lost Mikhail, and the thought of losing Alain too was unbearable. Yet she also understood that this was no longer something they could run from. The people behind Mikhail's death would never stop chasing them. The only way forward was through the fight. In quiet moments, Alex and Alain shared brief conversations about what might come after all of this, if there was an after. But both of them knew that survival itself was now uncertain. Inside the criminal network, panic had turned into aggression. Their leaders had gathered their remaining forces and planned a large scale operation. This time there would be no hesitation. Alain Moreau was not just an obstacle anymore, he was a direct threat to everything they had built. If he succeeded in delivering the evidence, their entire operation would collapse. That meant they were willing to do anything necessary to stop him, including turning the streets of New York into a battlefield. Alain carefully reviewed the final details of Mikhail's hidden files one more time. The deeper he looked, the more disturbing the truth became. The corruption extended beyond criminals on the streets. It reached powerful individuals with influence and protection. Mikhail had been trying to expose a system far larger than anyone had expected, and now Alain was carrying the weight of that truth alone. It was no longer just about revenge, it was about justice on a scale neither of them had fully understood at the beginning. As night fell, the situation escalated rapidly. The enemy made their move. A coordinated attack was launched, forcing Elaine and Alex into immediate action. What followed was chaos. Gunfire echoed through the streets, vehicles screeched across intersections, and civilians scattered as danger spread. Alain reacted instantly, using every skill he had developed over years of police work and survival. He fought with precision and control, always staying focused on getting Alex to safety while keeping the evidence secure. The attackers were well trained and determined, but Alain refused to break. Every move he made was calculated. Every escape route was chosen with precision. Even under extreme pressure, he remained one step ahead, refusing to give his enemies the satisfaction of victory. But the cost of survival was high. Each encounter pushed him closer to exhaustion, and each escape brought new risks. Eventually, Alain and Alex managed to break free from the immediate threat, but there was no sense of safety. They both understood that this was not over. The enemy would regroup quickly. This was only the beginning of the final phase. Alain finally made a decision. He would no longer wait to be hunted. He would choose the battlefield himself. As he prepared for what was coming, Alain thought about Mikhail once again. Everything he had learned pointed to one truth. His brother had died fighting a system much bigger than him, but he had not died in vain. His actions had led Alain here, to this moment where justice was finally within reach. That realization gave Alan the strength he needed to continue. Standing beside Alex, Alain loaded his weapon and looked toward the city that had become both their prison and their battleground. Somewhere out there, the men responsible for everything were preparing their final move, and so was he, because the next encounter would not be an escape, it would be the end of the war. The situation in New York City had fully transformed into a final stand. Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti were no longer simply surviving. They were now actively preparing for the confrontation that would decide everything. The evidence left behind by Mikhail Suvorov was safely in Alain's hands, but keeping it safe had become just as dangerous as uncovering it. The criminal organization hunting them had committed every resource to stop him. There was no longer any hesitation, no warnings, and no second chances. Alan moved with a calm intensity. The fear that once followed him in every situation had been replaced by focus. He knew exactly what was at stake now. This was not just about revenge for his brother, it was about exposing a system of corruption that had taken lives and destroyed truth. Every decision he made had weight, and every second mattered. Alex stayed close to him, silently observing the change in his behavior. The man she once met in confusion had become someone completely different, someone shaped by loss, truth, and survival. Alex herself was struggling with the emotional toll of everything they had been through. Losing Mikhail had already broken her world once, and now she stood beside his twin brother in a fight that felt impossible to win. But despite her fear, she did not leave. Something about Alain's determination gave her strength. In him, she saw the same courage Mikhail had once shown, but also something deeper, a willingness to face impossible odds without turning away. Meanwhile, inside the criminal network, panic had escalated into full scale aggression. Their leaders understood that failure was no longer an option. Alain Moreau had become a symbol of danger to their entire operation. He was no longer just a witness, he was a threat capable of bringing everything down. Orders were given without mercy. Every available asset was deployed to locate and eliminate him before he could act. As Alain reviewed the final structure of Mikhail's evidence, everything finally came together. The hidden connections, the financial trails, the names, and the operations all pointed to a deeply rooted system of corruption involving powerful figures. Mikhail had uncovered something massive, something that went far beyond street level crime. It explained why so many people had been willing to kill to keep the truth buried. And now that responsibility had passed to Alan. But Alan also knew something critical. Possessing the truth meant nothing unless it reached the right hands. That meant the final step was not just survival but delivery, and that made the coming confrontation unavoidable. The enemy would not allow him to walk away with the evidence intact. They would try everything to stop him before that happened. That night, the city felt different. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every sound carried meaning. Alan and Alex moved carefully, aware that they could be attacked at any moment. And then it happened. The enemy made their final approach. This was not a random ambush, it was coordinated, precise, and designed to trap them completely. Gunfire erupted as the streets turned into chaos once again. Alan reacted instantly, pulling Alex to cover while assessing escape routes in seconds. His training took over completely. He moved with precision, returning fire only when necessary, always prioritizing survival and protection. The attackers closed in from multiple directions, forcing him into a corner where decisions had to be made immediately. In the middle of the chaos, Alain realized something important. This was no longer a chase, it was a setup for elimination. The enemy wasn't trying to capture him, they were trying to erase him completely. That realization changed everything. Alain shifted from defense to full resistance. He fought back with everything he had, refusing to give his enemies control of the situation. Alex watched in shock as Alain pushed through impossible odds, protecting her while holding on to the evidence at the same time. Every move he made reflected not just survival instinct but purpose. He was no longer fighting just to stay alive. He was fighting to finish what his brother started. Eventually, after an intense and brutal confrontation, Alain and Alex managed to break through the ambush. But there was no victory in their escape, only the understanding that the final battle was now unavoidable. The enemy had shown their full hand. There would be no more warnings, no more chances, and no more delays. As they disappeared into the city once again, Alain made a final decision. He would not wait for another attack. He would end this on his terms, because the truth was no longer just something he was carrying. It was something he was ready to deliver. And very soon, everything would come to an end. The hunt across New York City had reached its final stage. Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti were no longer hiding. They were moving with purpose, knowing that every step brought them closer to the end of the conflict that had taken over their lives. The evidence left behind by Mikhail Suvorov was secure, but the danger surrounding it had never been greater. The criminal organization had shifted from pursuit to elimination. There would be no negotiations, no hesitation, and no escape routes left open. Alain's mindset had fully changed. What began as confusion and survival had become clarity and determination. He was no longer reacting to events, he was preparing to end them. The weight of his brother's death no longer felt like confusion or grief alone, but responsibility. Mikhail had uncovered the truth and paid the ultimate price. Now it was Alain's duty to ensure that truth was not buried again. Every decision he made carried that purpose. Alex remained beside him, despite the fear that had grown inside her over time. She had witnessed too much violence, too many close escapes, and too many moments where survival had seemed impossible. Yet she stayed. Part of it was loyalty to Mikhail, but part of it was trust in Alain. She could see that he was no longer just fighting for himself, he was fighting for something larger than both of them. That gave her strength, even in the middle of chaos. The enemy, however, had reached its breaking point. Their leaders understood that Alain Moreau had become a direct threat to everything they had built. They were no longer treating him as an individual target but as a final obstacle to their survival. Every remaining resource was activated. The city itself felt like it was being watched from all sides. The final operation was already in motion. As Alan reviewed the last remaining details of Mikhail's evidence, everything became painfully clear. The corruption he had uncovered was not limited to criminals. It extended into powerful systems protected by influence and money. Mikhail had been trying to expose something that could destroy multiple layers of criminal and political connections. That was why he had been hunted so relentlessly, and that was why Alan was now being pursued without mercy. There was only one problem left: delivery. The truth meant nothing if it could not reach the right people. and the enemy knew that. That night, the final confrontation began without warning. The attack was not random, it was coordinated, precise, and overwhelming. The criminals had decided to end it all in one move. The streets of the city became a battlefield as Alan and Alex were forced into immediate action. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, forcing them into motion instantly. There was no time to think, only to survive. Alan responded with complete control. Years of training took over as he moved through the chaos with calculated precision. Every step, every shot, every movement had purpose. His priority was clear: protect Alex and secure the evidence at all costs. The attackers were skilled, but Alan was adapting faster than they expected. He used every advantage available: cover, timing, and movement to stay ahead. But the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. The enemy was not just attacking, they were closing every possible exit. This was a trap designed to finish him. Alan realized it instantly. The goal was not survival of the chase anymore, it was total elimination. And that realization changed everything. Alan stopped retreating. He started pushing forward. With Alex following closely behind, he began breaking through the attack line instead of avoiding it. Every move became sharper, more decisive. The battle was no longer about escape, it was about ending the threat directly. The shift caught the attackers off guard. Alan was no longer behaving like a target, he was acting like a force moving through them. The intensity of the confrontation reached its peak. The attackers began losing control of the situation as Alan forced openings and created space where none existed. Step by step, he turned the ambush into a collapse. The enemy plan began to fail under pressure. Eventually, a breakthrough appeared. Alan used the moment without hesitation. He pulled Alex through the final gap and escaped the trap completely. But even as they broke free, there was no celebration, only silence and exhaustion. They both understood what had just happened. The enemy had revealed everything they had. There would not be another attempt like this, because now there would only be one final move left. Alan looked at Alex and then toward the city behind them. The war was almost over, and the ending was finally within reach. After breaking through the deadly ambush in New York City, Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti finally reached a brief moment of silence. But it didn't feel like safety. It felt like the calm right before the final storm. The streets behind them were still echoing with danger, and both of them knew the enemy would regroup quickly. The organization hunting them had already committed everything. There were no more backup plans left, only one final attempt to erase them completely. Alain stood still for a moment, breathing heavily, scanning every direction. His mind was no longer overwhelmed by fear or confusion. Everything had become clear. The evidence from Mikhail Suvorov was no longer just a burden he carried. It was a weapon, and the enemy knew it. That was why they were desperate. That was why every attack had become more direct, more violent, and more final. Alex looked at him, still shaken by what they had just survived. She had seen violence before, but this was different. This was systematic, organized, and personal. She understood now that there was no walking away from this, not anymore. Whatever Mikhail had uncovered had tied them both into something much bigger than either of them had expected, and now Elaine was the only one left who could finish it. Inside the criminal network, panic had turned into cold resolution. Their leaders realized that repeated failures had only made things worse. Alain Moreau was not breaking, he was adapting. Every attempt to kill him had strengthened his resolve. So they decided on a different strategy. No more scattered attacks, no more half measures. One final operation, a controlled strike designed to end everything at once. Alan, meanwhile, began moving with intention instead of reaction. For the first time since arriving in America, he was no longer trying to survive day by day. He was planning the end of the conflict. Every clue from Mikhail's files pointed toward the final truth: names, locations, financial trails, and hidden operations that could expose everything. But to release it, he needed a secure path, and he knew the enemy would try to stop him the moment he made that move. The tension grew heavier as night approached again. The city lights of New York felt colder now, almost distant. Every reflection, every shadow seemed to carry danger. Alain and Alex moved carefully, fully aware that they were being watched. The enemy had already lost too many opportunities, they would not hesitate this time. This would be their final strike. And then it began. Not a random attack, but a coordinated collapse of silence. From multiple directions, the final assault started. Vehicles moved in quickly, blocking escape routes. Armed men advanced with precision. There was no confusion in their movements anymore, only intent. End it now. Alang reacted instantly, pulling Alex into cover as the situation exploded around them. His instincts were razor sharp. He no longer hesitated. Every movement was decisive, every action controlled. He used the environment to his advantage: angles, distance, timing, turning chaos into a structure in his mind. But this time, something was different. The enemy wasn't just attacking, they were sealing everything. Alain realized the truth within seconds. This wasn't another ambush, it was a final containment operation. There were no escape gaps, no weak points, only pressure from all sides. Alex looked at him, panic rising, but Alain stayed calm. His expression had changed. He wasn't looking for escape anymore. He was looking for the end. He made a decision. Instead of breaking out, he pushed forward directly into the structure of the attack. Alex followed, trusting him completely now. What followed was pure intensity, movement, precision, and survival at the highest level. Alain didn't just avoid the attack, he disrupted it. Step by step, he broke their formation, forcing confusion into their controlled plan. The enemy expected escape. They didn't expect resistance that fought back through the center of their operation. The plan began to collapse, and in that collapse, Alain saw his opening. He didn't hesitate, he moved. Pulling Alex with him, he broke through the final line of pressure and escaped the trap completely. Behind them, the structure of the attack began to fall apart as their coordination failed. The final operation had not gone as planned, but Alain knew something important. This wasn't over yet, because now there was only one place left where it could end, and very soon he would walk straight into it. After surviving the final containment attempt in New York City, Alain Moreau and Alex Minetti found themselves in a rare moment of stillness, but it no longer felt like safety. It felt like the silence before the last move of a chess game. The criminal organization hunting them had shown everything they had. Every ambush, every chase, every coordinated strike had failed. Now, only one option remained for them: a final confrontation where there would be no escape, no backup, and no second chances. Alain understood this better than anyone. The evidence left behind by Mikhail Suvorov was now the center of everything. It was no longer just information, it was the key that could destroy powerful criminals and expose years of hidden corruption. And because of that, it had turned him into the most dangerous target in the city. But Alain was no longer reacting out of fear. He had reached a point of complete clarity. This was not just survival anymore, it was justice. Alex stayed close, watching him carefully. She could see the change in him clearly now. The confusion and hesitation from earlier in his journey were gone. In their place stood a man who had fully accepted his role in this fight. Alex had lost Mikhail, and she had almost lost Alan multiple times. But now she understood something important. This ending was inevitable. Running was no longer possible. Only resolution remained. Inside the criminal organization, everything was in motion for the final plan. Their leaders had stopped worrying about secrecy or cleanup. Their only focus was elimination. Alain Moreau had survived too much, he had seen too much, and worse, he had the truth. So they prepared one final strike, designed not just to kill him, but to erase every trace of his resistance at once. It would be fast, overwhelming, and absolute. Alain, however, was no longer the same man they had first hunted. He had studied Mikhail's files repeatedly, connecting every piece of the puzzle. He now fully understood the scale of what his brother had uncovered, an entire network of criminal influence tied to powerful and protected figures. This was not just a street level crime, it was something much larger, something deeply rooted and carefully protected, and exposing it would shake everything. But before that could happen, there was only one step left: deliver the truth. And he knew exactly what the enemy would try to do. As night fell again over New York, the atmosphere grew heavier. Even the city felt like it was holding its breath. Ellen and Alex moved carefully through the shadows, knowing they were being watched from somewhere. Every sound felt intentional now. Every movement felt observed. The enemy was no longer hiding, they were waiting. And then the final move began. Without warning, the last operation was launched. This time it was not chaotic, it was controlled, precise, and overwhelming. The remaining forces of the organization moved in perfect coordination, cutting off escape routes and sealing the area completely. This was not an ambush, it was a conclusion. Alain reacted instantly, but this time there was no attempt to escape the structure of the attack. Instead, he moved into it, breaking through the center, disrupting their control, forcing them to react instead of act. His training, instincts, and determination came together completely. Every step he took weakened their formation. Every movement created instability in their plan. Alex followed closely, trusting him fully now. She no longer questioned the danger. They had passed the point of fear. This was about survival, but also about finishing what had started with Mikhail's death. The enemy began to lose control faster than expected. Their perfect operation started breaking apart as Alain pushed through their lines. Confusion spread among their ranks. They had prepared for resistance, but not this kind of resistance. Not a man who refused to break under pressure. And in that moment, Alain saw it clearly: the final opening. Without hesitation, he moved through it, pulling Alex with him, escaping the last structure of the attack. Behind them, the operation collapsed into chaos. The organization had failed. But Alan knew something even more important now. There would be no more chances. No more games, no more attempts. Only one place remained where this could end, and he was already on his way there. Because the final truth was no longer hidden, it was waiting to be delivered. The city of New York City no longer felt like a place of chaos. It felt like a place holding its breath. Every chase, every ambush, every attempt on Alain Moreau's life had led to this single moment. The criminal organization that had been hunting him was running out of time, and Alain knew it. There were no more traps left to escape, no more hidden routes to take. Only one confrontation remained, and it would decide everything. Alain stood with Alex Minetti beside him, both exhausted from everything they had survived. But exhaustion no longer mattered. The evidence left behind by Mikhail Suvorov was secure, and for the first time it felt like they were holding something powerful enough to change everything. Not just revenge, but truth. A truth that had been buried under corruption, violence, and fear for years. Alex looked at Allen quietly. She had seen him change from a confused outsider into someone unshakable. She had lost Mikhail, and in many ways she had almost lost Allen too. But now she understood something important. This fight was never just about survival, it was about closure, about finishing what Mikhail started, no matter the cost. Inside the criminal organization, panic had finally turned into desperation. Their final plan had failed. Every attempt to eliminate Alain had collapsed, and now there was nothing left to hide behind. Their power, their influence, their control, it all depended on silence, and Alain Moreau had become the one man capable of breaking it completely. So they prepared one last attempt, not to intimidate, not to chase, but to end it. Alain already knew where this was heading. The only way this could truly end was if he delivered the evidence and confronted the source of everything directly. No more running, no more reacting. This time he would choose the moment. As night settled over the city, everything became quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Even the streets seemed emptier than usual. It was the calm before impact. Alan and Alex moved carefully through the final stretch, knowing that every step was being watched. The enemy was close now, very close. And then it happened. The final confrontation began. Unlike before, there was no chaos at first, only precision. The remaining forces of the organization revealed themselves in a coordinated final move. Their goal was simple: surround, isolate, and eliminate. This time there would be no escape routes, no distractions, no second chances. Allen didn't run, he didn't retreat, he moved forward, using everything he had learned: his training, his instincts, his experience. He pushed directly into the structure of the attack, not away from it, but through it. Every step disrupted their coordination. Every movement forced them to react instead of control. The plan that was meant to trap him began to collapse under his pressure. Alex stayed with him, no longer in fear, but in trust. She understood now that Alan wasn't just surviving, he was ending it. The organization tried to regain control, but it was too late. Their final operation broke apart as Alan forced a path through their defenses. Confusion spread, orders failed, structure disappeared. The hunters became disorganized. And in that moment, Alain saw it clearly: an opening. not for escape, but for resolution. He moved instantly, pulling Alex with him, breaking through the final barrier. Behind them, the last operation collapsed completely. Years of control, violence, and secrecy ended in failure. Silence followed, not peace, but conclusion. Later, when everything settled, the truth carried by Mikhail Suvorov finally reached the right hands. The corruption he had died trying to expose could no longer be hidden. His sacrifice was not forgotten. It became the reason justice finally moved forward. The people responsible were no longer untouchable. The system they built had cracks now, cracks that would never fully heal. Alain stood quietly afterward, no longer running, no longer fighting. Alex remained beside him, understanding that something had ended, even if nothing would ever feel completely normal again. Mikhail was gone, but his truth remained, and because of that, he had not lost. As the city lights of New York continued to shine, Alan finally understood what his journey had been about. It was never just about survival, it was about bringing the truth into the light. And in the end, he had done exactly that. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing movie breakdowns. See you in the next video.